This program is about unsolved mysteries. Whenever possible, the actual family members and police officials have participated in recreating the events. What you are about to see is not a news broadcast.
Ralph Sigler was a double agent for the United States who for 10 years fed the Soviet KGB misleading information and exposed Russian spies. In April of 1976, he was found dead in a Maryland motel room. His family says he was murdered. Against his family's wishes, Robert Argenti asked Maria Armstrong to come live with him in Mesa, Arizona, despite her history of mental illness. 5 months later, Robert Argenti was dead, and Maria Armstrong had vanished. We'll also tell you the inspirational story of a 14-year-old boy who survived the horrors of the Nazi concentration camp at Dachau, thanks to an American GI who gave him food and the will to live. Steve Ross is now an American citizen, a happy family man, and counselor to disadvantaged children. He would like to say thank you to the unknown, kind-hearted GI who so dramatically turned his life around 45 years ago. The Navajo Nation, 25,000 square miles of their stark, beautiful land lies nestled in the north-central section of Arizona. The landscape is dotted with tiny government housing settlements. On November 9, 1988, one of the settlements, Bitter Springs, had a mysterious visitor. A dark-haired girl whom none of the townspeople had ever seen before wandered through the streets of Bitter Springs. She called herself simply Sandy and mystified everyone with her behavior. She carried on an animated conversation with herself and walked into several homes uninvited. She was secretive and seemed to be hiding from something or someone.
She asked, "Can you dye my hair?" I said, "What for?" "Cut my hair blonde so I can change my identity."
As evening approached, the girl asked one family if she could leave a pickup truck behind their house.
My niece told me that this Sandy wanted to park her vehicle there for about a week. Immediately I said, "Well, why don't she park it out front?" But she said that she wanted to really park her vehicle where it was hidden from the road. I didn't get really suspicious until I asked my niece if she knew Sandy, and she said no. I just had a funny feeling that things were not all right.
After 2 days, the dark-haired girl abruptly left the settlement. None of the residents ever saw her again. Within a week, the people of Bitter Springs would learn the truth about their mysterious visitor. Her real name was Maria Armstrong, and her brief sojourn in the Navajo settlement was a climax to a tragic love story, one that began nearly 10 years ago. Maria Armstrong grew up in a small suburban city in southern New Jersey. She was a sweet-tempered, attractive girl who had always had her choice of boyfriends. One of the young men who courted Maria was Robert Argenti, nicknamed Ron. He had graduated high school at 17 with honors and immediately joined the National Guard. He was outgoing and athletic, yet he had always been fascinated by the introverted Maria.
Maria she was like innocent, and she was beautiful. She had long, almost black hair, really gorgeous. And I think that's what my brother was attracted to her, because she was so unusual looking. She was sweet, she was kind to people. She was your friend.
In 1984, Ron Argenti joined his family in Arizona. Ron settled in the city of Mesa and got a job as a mechanic at McDonnell Douglas building helicopters. Back in New Jersey, Maria had begun to behave strangely, frequently slipping into a world of delusion and paranoia. Her parents feared she was using drugs and put her in both state and private mental hospitals. Finally, in 1984, Maria was diagnosed as suffering from paranoid schizophrenia, a physical disease of the brain which most commonly strikes its victims in their teens and 20s. It is an illness over which the patient has no control. Schizophrenics often cannot tell the difference between the real world and the delusions that plague them. There is no known cure for schizophrenia, but the symptoms can sometimes be controlled with medication.
Hey, Ron, how you doing?
Ron Argenti never forgot the beautiful Maria. He urged her to move to Arizona and live with him so she could start over with a clean slate.
He seemed to think that she was fine and that all he wanted to do was get her away from New Jersey and get her away from the drugs and get her away from the bad influences back there and help her to reestablish her life out here.
In June of 1988, Maria finally came to Arizona. Despite his family's objections, Maria moved in with Ron.
We were concerned because we did hear that she was in a mental institution and we knew she was on drugs back east. So we were kind of concerned about it. But, you know, they were holding hands, kissing. They were like a couple.
For the first few weeks, Maria seemed happy in Mesa. She blossomed under Ron's loving attention. Soon after Maria arrived, Ron began working the graveyard shift, so Maria was often alone at night. Before long, she began pacing, having imaginary conversations, and sadly, once again exhibiting symptoms of schizophrenia.
Somebody in the apartment complex where they lived, Maria had made friends with, and Ron found out that this person was supplying drugs to Maria.
Maria's behavior became increasingly erratic. Her paranoia ran rampant. Time and time again, she accused Ron of plotting against her.
Maria. Maria. Maria, calm down. Listen, calm down.
Leave me alone! They told me about you!
Okay.
They told me!
All right!
Ron told his sisters that Maria often attacked him physically. Ron said Maria once hit him so hard, she ruptured his eardrum.
She wasn't going to the psychiatrist. She had canceled her appointments. She wasn't taking her medication. She said that it kept her up at night. Well, she was already up all the time at night. She never slept anyway.
I would talk to Ron on the phone, and I would tell him, Ronnie, you have to do something. You have to get rid of her. Send her home. I don't want to do that. I want to help her, he would say. I said, but you can't help her. It's obvious you can't help her. She needs more than you to help her. She needs psychiatric care. And then he would get really mad.
Okay, I know.
Who are you talking to?
By Tuesday, November 8th, Ron had finally reached the end of his patience.
Who are you talking to?
Roxanne.
Hi, Roxanne.
Yeah.
I called him, and he said, the neighbors are complaining. The management wants to kick me out, and I want to get her out of here.
She is. She's going soon. She's going back soon.
And she's there in the room, listening to all this.
The next morning, Wednesday, Maria Armstrong slowly drove into the Navajo settlement of Bitter Springs, 260 miles north of Mesa. She was calling herself Sandy and trying to sell the pickup she was driving.
First thing she said to you, you're interested in buying a truck? And I said, no, I'm not.
You know where I could get it painted?
And she wanted to know where's the nearest town so you can get her truck repainted it. I just told her I have no idea. The nearest place you can get the truck repainted is about 30 miles up north.
On the highway here and make a right-hand turn. And
I just thought maybe she's hiding from her boyfriend or something like that, because she said she left her boyfriend someplace.
Thanks.
okay.
I thought she was going to leave right away, but she never did.
The following morning, around 10 a.m., the Arizona Highway Patrol responded to a complaint in Bitter Springs. Maria had left her pickup truck parked behind a house there, and the owner feared that the truck was stolen. The officer ran a computer check on the truck's license plate. He found it was registered to Robert Argenti and arranged to have it towed to a nearby town. After searching several locations, the officer got a lead. The mysterious girl was hiding in a nearby house.
Come on out, I see you behind the bed. Come on out, or I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna drag you out.
Where are you taking me?
I'm not gonna take you anywhere. I just want to find out what's going on. Let's go out here and talk.
Okay.
I've been getting word from around here that you're going around introducing yourself as Sandy. What's that all about?
I just never liked my name. Sandy sounds a lot friendlier.
Do you have authorization to have the truck? And
Yes.
who gave it to you?
Well, Robert.
When did he give it to you?
Well, he realized he was too sick to go to work, and he let me have the truck to come up here. Listen, I need to get some cigarettes. Can I go now?
Okay, well, I don't have anything on you right now, but something is going on. Just watch yourself. I did feel suspicious, even after I let her go, but I couldn't get a finger on it. I just had the feeling that she had either done something, was doing something, or was going to do something.
Came by earlier and just, kind of messy.
4 days later, on Monday, a maintenance man at Ron Argenti's apartment complex asked the manager to come with him to Ron's apartment.
On Monday, November 14th, I noticed a stack of old newspapers in front of Ron's apartment. We went up, got the manager, and then we entered the apartment.
Okay, I guess we'll go in.
Okay.
Hello, maintenance.
When I first hit the door just flung wide open. I walked in, and I saw a pile of clothes on the couch. Didn't see anybody in there, and everything was quiet. So I walked through the unit looking, yelling, anybody here? And didn't get any answer. Walked straight through to the bedroom, and nothing.
I'll send me back here. They might have skipped out.
Great.
Oh, my God.
What?
According to the medical examiner report on the autopsy, the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head region, and Mr. Argenti had been dead for several days. Looking at this guy, it's definitely going to be a homicide. His body had been covered by bedding, pillows, clothing, as if someone was trying to hide the discovery of the body. Okay, I want to come over here, get a shot of this hammer. We found just left of the body a small hand sledgehammer. We also found that he had been stabbed in the right rib area with a wooden-handled knife, but the knife wound came after the trauma to the head. Based on the evidence and later discussions with family and friends, it was our theory that Mr. Argenti had been sleeping in a sitting position on the couch because he was afraid of Maria Armstrong, and that sometime during when he was asleep, Ms. Armstrong came up and inflicted the blows to his head with the sledgehammer and then subsequently stabbed him. Then we believe that she covered the body in an attempt to hide the crime. She went into the bedroom, changed her clothing, and then took the keys to Mr. Argenti's truck and then left Mesa and drove up north to Bitter Springs. The last sighting that we had on Maria was on November 11th of 1988, where she was seen hitchhiking on the highway next to Bitter Springs back towards the Flagstaff area. I know that if Maria wandered off the track and didn't find shelter, I don't think she could live through the elements up there because it's very cold in northern Arizona that time of year. If she was able to hitch a ride and get tied up with somebody, then yes, I would say she's probably very much alive and very dangerous. There's no predicting what she's going to do.
Update: Maria Armstrong has been captured. Shortly after this story aired, the FBI received a call from one of our viewers with information regarding Armstrong's whereabouts.
We received a telephone call from an unidentified caller that Marie Armstrong had been living in the Memphis, Tennessee area, and that she was going to be at the airport on August 3rd of this year. The FBI subsequently went to the airport and were able to identify her, and they did place her under arrest.
Armstrong had changed her appearance by dyeing her hair blonde. 2 weeks later, she was returned to Arizona to face a charge of first-degree murder. Next, the story of a 14-year-old boy who survived 5 years in Nazi concentration camps and then was given the will to live by an unknown American GI. Now he desperately wants to say thank you to this kind soldier. Our next story is about the triumph of one boy's will, his will to survive the horrors of a Nazi concentration camp. His name was then Shmulik Rosenthal, but today he lives and works in Boston and goes by the name of Steve Ross. The mystery here is that at a crucial point in his flight from Germany, he was befriended by an unknown American GI who gave him food and rekindled his broken spirit. Now, 45 years later, he wants to say thank you. Perhaps you can help. 1939, the German invasion of Poland. Adolf Hitler's blitzkrieg brought Poland to its knees in 3 devastating weeks. Hitler's vendetta against the Jewish people struck with special force against the Jews of Poland. At an isolated farm outside their home in the city of Lodz, Joseph and Baja Rosenthal, a Jewish couple, hid their youngest son Shmulik with a Catholic family.
They knew these farm people, and they wanted me to go and live there, hoping that when the war is over, they can come back and pick me up again. My mother said, help us keep my son. Shmulek is too small to go with us. I try to be a big man. I tried to be like my father, to emulate him, but it was hard. But I didn't cry. They kissed me, and they said, be a good boy, Shmulek. You have a nice home here. And that was it. I have never seen them again.
In less than a year, the Nazis had found the 9-year-old child and put him in a concentration camp. Auschwitz, Sobibor, Treblinka. The very names conjure unspeakable cruelty. All of the camps where mass exterminations took place were located in Poland, and of the nearly 6 million Jews murdered, more than 50% were Polish. 1.5 million children were among the dead. Shmulik Rosenthal was one of the few children who survived. From the time he was 9 until he was 14, he was interred at 10 different camps. The last one was Dachau in Germany.
It was extremely difficult to survive because there was not enough food. We got a liter soup for lunch and a liter soup for supper, and we got 1 slice of bread that was divided up from 1 pound of bread for 20 people. At the best time, we fell apart by working 12 to 14 hours a day. And with lack of food, you couldn't survive much longer. So people kept dying constantly. Cleanliness, we never were able to wash up. Now, no hot water. I didn't see any hot water for 5 years. There wasn't such a thing as hot water. There was nothing in there to sleep on except the boards. You slept on the boards, no blankets. You covered yourself with what you had. It was very difficult to understand for me what is really going on. I had dreams that I was with my family, and here I end up in a hell, in a place where it's called hell, life and death, survival of the fittest. As long as you survive today, from one day to the next, that's all you were worrying about. Do I have another day to live? We all pray to God all the time.
In December of 1944, Allied forces turned back the German army at the Battle of the Bulge, and 1 month later made their first significant incursions onto German soil. Nearly 5 years had passed since young Shmulik Rosenthal was first imprisoned. In April of 1945, Allied troops liberated the concentration camps. An American GI snapped this photograph of the cheering inmates at Dachau. One of them was 14-year-old Shmulik Rosenthal. Shmulik's older brother had also been captured by the Nazis, and he too ended up at Dachau. The two boys would later discover that their mother, father, and 6 brothers and sisters had all perished in the camps.
Before the American troops came, I was 99% dead. It was 1% of life that my heart was ticking in me. I weighed about 60 pounds at that time. I was infested with lice. 2 days after we were liberated, we were released from the camp and we were asked to go towards hospitalizations. We walked by a unit that was tanks, and there was a soldier sitting on the tank. As I came closer, I could see he was eating with his bayonet into his mouth, putting in with his bayonet.
Hey, kid.
He jumped off the tank, and he gave me the can that he was eating from.
Hey, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. Everything's okay.
I closed it up, and I gave it to my brother, and I fell down on my knees, and I held on to his legs, and I kissed his boots for giving me the food.
Hey, listen, everything's gonna be all right.
He put his hand around on me, and he wasn't scared he's gonna get my lice or my diseases or my sicknesses.
Okay. Mike, hey, throw me some rations, will you?
He was a good man. He looked to me as though he was rough and tough, but yet he knew how to put his arm around me at that time in my life, when nobody ever done that before.
Take this. You keep it. Keep it. Hold it with you, okay?
That soldier gave me a handkerchief. I did not know till later on that this was a flag. The flag of freedom. I felt as though it was a miracle from God that I was reborn. It was starting a new life from here on.
Shmulik never let the flag out of his sight. He carried it with him when he came to the United States in 1948 under the auspices of the Committee for the Care of European Children. Shmulik Americanized his name to Steve Ross, married and had a son and a daughter. His brother Harry also came to the States and has stayed close to Steve and his family. For the past 30 years, Steve has been a licensed psychologist counseling disadvantaged teenagers in Boston. He chose his career with the American soldier in mind.
For the Latin test.
Steve wanted to help other children the way the young GI had helped him.
And you mean a week from this Saturday, you're going to take another exam. Is that national?
Keep this. You're going to be safe now.
If I could ever find this soldier, I would say to him that he is part of my life. He would be part of my family. I would have wanted him to know that what he has done for me, that I emulated and that I love people because of him. I have experienced something in a critical period of my life that I could never forget, and it always is with me, that this man was such a compassionate man, a soldier who was taught to kill, could do that. Why couldn't we all be more sensitive to each other's needs?
Steve thinks that the American soldier belonged to the 191st Army Tank Battalion, which was part of the 20th Armored Division. He was traveling from Dachau towards Munich around the 1st of May in 1945. Next, Ralph Sigler was a career Army officer with a wife, a loving daughter, and a secret life. In April of 1976, he was found dead in a Maryland motel room. His family says he was murdered.
I think this key will open it, but he has the latch. We'll have to break the door down.
I'm sure he's in there. Ralph!
11 p.m. on the evening of April 13th, 1976. In a motel room near Fort Meade in Maryland, an Army electronics expert named Ralph Sigler was found dead. The Army said that Ralph had electrocuted himself by wrapping wire around both forearms, and their official verdict was suicide.
Mom, can you take everybody? Because I want to be alone with Dad.
2 weeks later, Ralph Sigler was laid to rest. But during the official viewing of the body, his family discovered telling evidence that the official verdict may have been wrong.
When I looked at him the first time, I didn't believe it was him. His body was so bruised, so mutilated. So it didn't look like my father at all. I noticed that his nose was broken. I noticed that there was a dent in the top of the head and there was blood. I looked inside his mouth. He was missing his partial plate, the 2 front teeth, but all the teeth were cracked and jagged, as if someone hit him in the mouth.
What are you doing? Mom, he looks lousy. Look at this. Look at his hand.
I took off one of his gloves. I saw cuts on the palm.
Look at his arm.
I rolled up the sleeves. I looked at the arms. I found a lot of bruises. From looking at the body and the condition that the body was in, I don't think he committed suicide. I believe that he was beaten to death. I believe he was murdered.
Ralph Sigler's life was as unusual as his death, for Ralph Sigler was no ordinary Army officer. From 1966 to his death, Sigler was a double agent working for the United States.
The idea that Ralph Sigler committed suicide in the way that the Army and the Maryland State Police described it is patently and totally absurd.
Journalists Joe and Susan Trento have co-written a book called Widows. In this book, they shed new light on the strange life and death of Ralph Sigler. Sigler was a central figure in an espionage operation run by the FBI and Army intelligence, whose purpose was to deceive the Soviet KGB and expose Soviet spies. For 10 years, Ralph Sigler walked a razor's edge in the service of his country. His family believes that this is the reason why his life was brutally cut short. They want to know who was responsible. Ralph Sigler's secret mission began in Mexico City in December of 1966. He had been recruited by Army intelligence after an exhaustive search. One of the centers for Soviet espionage on the Western Hemisphere was at their Mexican embassy. One afternoon, Sigler calmly walked through the front door.
I'd like to speak to the KGB resident.
Sigler told KGB officials that he was prepared to deliver stolen documents outlining the latest U.S. developments in missile defense.
Здравствуйте, товарищ. Сидите. What do you want? I want to come to work for your government. I have a great...
The Soviets took the bait and Ralph Sigler's double life began. For 10 years, Ralph Sigler contacted his Soviet employers through various clandestine methods. disseminating misleading information given him by his Army superiors. One of these Army officers was Louis Martell.
Ralph was considered a very good double agent by the community. He was a shining star. And when I say community, I mean both that's the FBI and, to a degree, the CIA, as a very valuable asset and a man who was doing a very good job.
The documents Ralph gave to the Soviets were crafted to deliberately trick them into trying to duplicate inoperative technology. The ruse succeeded time after time.
Ralph gave them plans for a missile launcher that was a multi-tube missile launcher, and the missile launcher was supposed to launch maybe 10 missiles at the same time. Well, when we built it, the thing fell over backwards. It would never work, and we invested millions in it. We got the Russians to invest millions in it also, and that never did work. So a lot of this is to get the Russians to invest money in operations and time that failed.
Ziegler also exposed Soviet agents to the FBI. One of the most important of these was Rudolf Herman, a Soviet master spy who lived and worked in the United States. According to the Trentos, the FBI was concerned about the Army's internal security and asked Ziegler to keep this part of his mission secret. He agreed. 1976, San Francisco. Ralph was ordered by Army intelligence to take a routine polygraph examination.
Is your last name Ziegler?
Yes, it is.
Please answer with a simple yes or no only. Are you?
The results surprised Ziegler's superiors.
Yes.
Have you ever passed any unauthorized intelligence to the Soviet Union?
No.
The question or questions that showed that something was bothering were questions involved with what he had given to the Soviets that he was not authorized to give. That question, in many forms, was asked time and time again on every poly, and every poly it showed indications of deception.
Joe Trento believes Ziegler's failure to pass the lie detector test was due to his secret relationship with Rudolf Herman, the operation the Army never knew about.
Rudolf Herman was the #1 Soviet spy in America. And this was the great secret that the FBI kept from the Army. They were never told that Ralph Ziegler was servicing Herman. So when they asked him questions, did you ever have any unauthorized contacts with the Soviets? Ralph would say no, and it would show up as deception. Ralph, of course, thought that the FBI would clear it for the Army, and they never did that.
Fort Meade, Maryland, the headquarters of Army intelligence.
Outside of what you already told us, have you passed any other unauthorized information to the Soviets?
Ralph's failure to successfully pass the San Francisco examinations led to more tests. He failed every one.
Held any other money from one of your missions?
No.
The next day, Ralph was scheduled for a hostile interrogation session, a session that would be conducted assuming that he was a traitor.
No.
Do you think I could try that on, please?
24 hours before this interrogation, Ralph called his wife at the dress shop where she was working.
Ralph, is that you?
Now listen to me, this is important.
Where are you?
I want you to hire a respectable lawyer.
Ralph sounded distraught, as if he was under tremendous pressure.
Just listen to me. I want you to sue the U.S. Army. I'm dying. I never lied.
Then the phone went dead.
Ralph?
Ilsa rushed home and called Army intelligence. Several hours later, Louis Martell found Ralph dead in his motel room, and the Maryland State Police were called. Sergeant Roger Castle was a trooper in charge of the investigation.
As far as the room looked, there did not appear to have been a struggle. There was no indication that Mr. Ziegler had suffered any other injuries other than the fact that he had apparently fallen from a height of the chairs which he had stacked next to the light switch. There was bleeding from the nose area, and the blood had deposited on the rug. There was no other indication of any signs of injury other than the wires which had been attached to his arms. The locks on the door to the room had been double locked from the inside. As a result of our investigation, we found that sometime during that evening of the 13th of April, Ralph Ziegler placed two chairs, one a larger chair on the bottom, a smaller chair on the top, near a light switch which which activated the electrical outlet. At that time, he apparently took a cord, a lamp cord, cut it off, spliced the wires, and wrapped both wires around his biceps. He plugged the outlet in the socket, got on top of the chairs, used a cup of water as a conductor, and turned the light switch on, causing him to be electrocuted. There was no evidence developed to indicate that the death of Ralph Sigler was anything other than suicide.
The suicide theory makes no sense because Ralph had no motive for suicide. The Army told us throughout the entire week of the polygraphs that they were giving him there outside of Fort Meade, that they over and over and over told him that no matter what he had done, they didn't care. They weren't going to prosecute him. They weren't going to punish him. They weren't going to hurt him in any way. That the worst that could happen would be the end of the operation, that they would give him letters of immunity. All they wanted to know was what he had done.
The fact of the matter is, the experts we talked to about electrocution and electricity told us that the amount of damage caused to Sigler's arms by the presence of the electrical wire wrapped around them couldn't have been made by a 110-volt circuit that you'd find in a normal motel lighting situation as you did at this motel. And in fact, it would take a much greater amount of electricity to do this sort of damage.
I'm sorry, folks, we're conducting a police investigation. Please clear the hallways.
The Trentos believe that Ralph Sigler was kidnapped by the KGB, tortured, and then murdered. His double life had finally run out.
The phone call to Ralph's wife is very interesting and very smart on the Soviets' part.
Ralph, is that you?
They knew Ralph was going to be questioned.
Could you call me back when I get home?
Standard tradecraft on the part of the KGB would mean that they would take Ralph and put him through their own hostile interrogation, probably torture him, and the Soviets have a history of using electricity for torture, and get the answers they needed.
I want you to sue the U.S. Army.
Was he one of their agents, or was he really a double agent for the Army? Had he snookered him all these years? And Ralph may have been forced to give up those answers. Had he compromised Rudolf Herman to the Army and to the FBI? That's why the Soviets had every reason in the world to kill Ralph Sigler at this point.
My feelings about the theory is that the KGB did not kill Ralph Sigler. In fact, my opinion, and strictly my opinion, based on facts, is that Ralph Sigler committed suicide.
But based on the evidence she found in the open casket, Ralph's wife is convinced that his death was no suicide.
The government told me all the time, if anything happened, we'll be here for you. We're taking care. Why? They lied to me when he died. He wasn't a double agent. I respected national security. So they dealt with me for 11 years. If even something happened, they could have come and tell me the truth. And I want to know the truth. And I will not rest till I know the truth.
If Ralph Sigler committed suicide, as the authorities believe, why did he use such an unusual and potentially ineffective method? Why is there such a discrepancy between the official verdict of suicide and the Sigler family's own observations? But if Ralph Sigler was tortured and murdered, then who was responsible? Was Ralph Sigler a traitor or a hero? If he committed suicide because he knew he'd betrayed his country, then he was a traitor. If he was murdered by the KGB as punishment for his disclosure of their secrets, then he was a hero. His family will not rest until they know just who Ralph Sigler really was. When we return, the story of one of the heroes who put the notorious Night Stalker behind bars. He has disappeared. In the summer of 1985, Los Angeles, California was paralyzed by fear. For more than 6 months, a serial killer had terrorized the city, and there was seemingly no method to his madness or limit to his horrific crimes. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department assigned a 120-member task force to the case. Detectives interviewed thousands of witnesses and checked out all possible leads, but for months, the unknown killer remained at large. He became known as the Night Stalker, and he killed at least 13 people before his sadistic spree of kidnapping, rape, and murder came to an end. 18 citizens collected rewards for their assistance in solving the Night Stalker case. But one of the largest rewards remains unclaimed. Authorities hope that someone watching tonight can help locate the man whose crucial information helped end the Night Stalker's deadly rampage. On August 26, 1985, an unidentified man called the task force's hotline.
Detective Carrillo, can I help you?
I have some information on the Night Stalker.
What kind of information do you have?
I know who he is.
Detectives immediately sensed that the caller's information was legitimate and arranged a meeting.
What about this afternoon at 3 o'clock?
3 o'clock's fine.
Alex, thank you for calling. We'll see you at 3.
Okay, bye.
Alex, why don't you have a seat over there?
That afternoon, the caller met with detectives Gil Carrillo and Carlos Avila.
The man identifying himself as Alejandro Espinoza. The individual that he wished to identify, he knew as Richard, or by a moniker that he knew on the streets as Despeinado, which translated into English means the uncombed one.
He tells me about all these burglaries he commits.
Alejandro was telling us about burglaries where Richard had told him about that coincided with the murders that we were investigating, where there had been a murder burglary.
What's he generally do with the property that he takes on the burglaries?
He takes it to this fence, and I can show you where that's at. I know where the house is at. I don't know where the address is.
Do you know
That information that he had that we had not heard coming from other individuals that were calling in, and it was information that we knew that perhaps only the suspect himself or associates of the suspect might know.
Alejandro Espinoza told the detectives that on several occasions he had accompanied the man he knew as Richard to a house in the Echo Park area of Los Angeles.
Felipe, abrigo la puerta, por favor.
According to Espinoza, Richard would enter the house alone and exchange stolen property for cash.
Alejandro became suspicious and, as he said, had put 2 and 2 together after realizing that a lot of the property that Richard had taken on days that he had talked about doing a recent burglary, Alejandro had read in the paper that coincidentally there had been another burglary or another homicide that the quote-unquote Night Stalker had been attributed to. He finally realized that his friend, whom he knew as Richard, was, in his opinion, the Night Stalker.
3 days after their meeting with Espinoza, sheriff's detectives made a positive match of a fingerprint taken from one of the Night Stalker crime scenes with a possible suspect, 25-year-old Richard Ramirez. Because Ramirez had a prior arrest record, there was a booking photo on file.
As soon as we got that booking photo, we then went to Alejandro out on the streets.
Alex, how are you?
Showed him a copy of the booking photo.
Yeah, that's Richard.
You positive?
I'm positive, no doubt. That's him.
When Alejandro identified the mugshot that we displayed for him, we knew that we were talking of one and the same person, and that Richard was the man we were in fact looking for.
The following morning, Richard Ramirez's photograph appeared on the front page of every major newspaper in Los Angeles. Within hours, Ramirez was chased and captured by a group of angry citizens after he had allegedly tried to steal a car. By noon, he was in police custody, and the Night Stalker's 7-month reign of terror had finally come to an end. On September 20th, 1989, nearly 5 years after his demonic rampage began, Richard Ramirez was convicted on 43 felony charges, including 13 counts of first-degree murder. 6 weeks later, Ramirez was sentenced to die in a California gas chamber.
Big deal. Death always went with the territories. I'll see you in Disneyland.
Alejandro Espinoza is entitled to $6,388 for the vital information he provided authorities, but Espinoza has not come forward to claim his reward. Alejandro Espinoza is 26 years old, and according to police, he may have a wife and a young son. Join me next week for another edition of Unsolved Mysteries.